All right. I think I'm unmuted now.
I had to get live on YouTube.
Lauren, you're working a lot of different things there.
She needs to get a hat to wear, so we know what hat she has on.
Okay, so
Before the one.
do we have everyone here? I'm trying to scroll down. I don't have my view set right.
Yeah, Commissioner Ryan texted me and said he'll be running behind. He'll join us in a bit.
Okay. All right. And Commissioner France, are you at Indian Rock?
I'm in, I think.
Okay. All right. I was admiring your background. All right. Well, it's 2:30. We'll go ahead and get started, and I'll turn it over to Ms. Pack.
Mike, did you want to make any comments before we got started, or?
No, assuming everybody's seen the PowerPoint so far, I think you have a sense of what we're here to talk about, and there's plenty to talk about. So I'll turn it over to Debbie.
Okay, and can everybody see my screen?
Yep.
With the financial update? Okay, just want to make sure that we're working. So today we're here to talk about the preliminary 12/31 financial update. These are unaudited numbers, so we do anticipate some changes, and there are some transactions that are not yet picked up in these numbers because either the timing or whatever, but we don't anticipate that they'd be significant at this point. So we'll jump right into the general fund. And as I go through this, if you have questions, please feel free to stop me and ask. There's a lot of numbers here, so I'll try to answer to the best of my memory. And we'll just get through it. And then if you have any further questions, we can always come back and give you more detail on what those were. So general fund, bottom line was the actual total revenue at this point was $43.5 million as compared to last year's total revenues of $43.9 million, which is about $500,000 less than what we actually collected in 2019. As compared to the 2020 budget, that's about $500,000 less than what we anticipated collecting in the 2020 original budget. We went back to original budget numbers just so we can compare what we were anticipating doing at the beginning of the year last year. Expenditures, and we'll get into the detail of some of these numbers as we go through the presentation. So I won't look at a lot of these in detail at the moment. Total expenditures to date for 2020 was $37.5 million. Last year, that number was $41.5 million. So about a $4 million reduction in expenditures from 2019 to 2020. Our budgeted revenue was almost 44, or expenditures was 43.6 million, or almost $44 million. So we're coming in under budget on our expense side about $6 million. When we did the original budget, we anticipated having a small net income of about $46,000. With the actuals that we're recognizing today, we're showing that to be about $5.9 million, which added to our fund balance at the beginning of the year of $7 million brings our fund balance to about $12.9 million. Some of the things that we need to note that have happened or have not happened maybe to the general fund that are fairly significant, and we've been kind of holding on to these as we've been talking about projections and numbers as we've gone through the year. TPEC funding, while we did not have to do an additional transfer in 2020, it was really close and we kind of just pushed off some things that we could. We do believe in 2021, because of the reduction in revenues, that we will have to do some additional funding. TPEC is working on a presentation to bring before City Commission, kind of outline what they expect we'll book this year and where they think they'll be. Arts and Humanities, we did require a transfer of $517,000. We budgeted $645,000 for that transfer, but without the River Festival, that number was reduced. And making this transfer, that gets that fund up to its target fund balance of $100,000. The golf fund, as we know, with the golf course closed and having minimal and lower hours, we ended up looking at that fund and they came in a negative about $50,000 in that fund. We believe that the minimum transfer to make to that fund is $100,000. That should get us through the first few months of 2021 from a cash flow perspective, because most of their revenue is not generated until March or April. They do have some in the earlier months, but not as much as when we get to the spring-like weather. The OCCK contractual credit, the reduction was $495,000, but as you may remember, we didn't finalize that number until mid-December. And one note on this also, part of that reduction was we didn't pay the fourth quarter payment, but they also issued us a refund check. The non-payment is showing in the 2021 financials at this point, but the refund check was not received till 2021. So that number is not showing in the 2020 financials at this point. The other thing that happened that we weren't even expecting back in March was the CARES funding that we received of about $1.1 million. So what have we been doing as we've been going along? Since March, we've been trying to give you the numbers that we thought were being as accurate as we could be as we went along every month. The revenues were a real struggle with where those numbers were going to be. So we adjusted those every month that we reported those, and we adjusted those to actual so that we could say, okay, this is what we actually collected and this is what we anticipate to collect based on the prior 3-year average for the remainder of the year. The expenditures on the other side, once we adjusted those numbers for reductions that department heads gave us in commodities and contractual services, and the reductions that we believed we would see from work share and furloughs, we really haven't adjusted those numbers much since then. We've tweaked them a little bit here and there based on changes in those things, but for the most part, those numbers have stayed pretty significant. So the real point is, how did we get from 41,000 or 46,000 to 5.9 million? We've been seeing this coming as we've been presenting these all along, but it was really hard for us to say, we're really there, we can do something, and let's go ahead and do some of these things that we didn't do, because we still have budget authority through the end of the year, so we didn't really know what those expenditure numbers were going to be. However, about the end of October, when we did the end of October financials, which was information available in mid-November, we saw that our revenues were already about $1.5 million ahead of what 2019 was, and our expenditures were already about $2 million below what 2019 was. But at that time, it's mid-November, we really didn't see an urgent need to reinstate anything toward the end of the year. So we just kind of stayed the course through the end of the year from those numbers. And this little graph just really shows you how we got to that 1.5 and that $2 million number. The reason I took out the $4.3 million in that, or $6 million, was because that was the transfers that we didn't normally do until November. So that really wasn't affected in 2019 at the time. So we needed to take that number out. So where did all those savings, how did those numbers compare to what we were projecting on the expenditure side? Back in the March 31st financials, which was the first financial update that we provided that included savings for work share and furlough, we were projecting personnel savings about $3.2 million. Our actual savings came in to be about $3.5 million, which is about a $300,000 increase to the bottom line. For employee benefits, that number was $230,000 being projected, and we came in at actual savings of $392,000. Commodities, we were projecting savings of $322,000, and that number came in at $711,000. Contractual services was $562,000, and we came in at $1.3 million savings. Capital outlay was $176,000, and that number came in at $331,000. And interfund transfers, we didn't anticipate any savings, but we did save about $25,000 on that arts and humanities transfer. So altogether, that increase to the bottom line from where we were projecting back from the March 31st, the increase is about $1.7 million on the expenditure side. On the revenue side, we were looking at decreases. So we were projecting back in March with the March financials that we would see a decrease in sales tax of about $2.1 million, when in fact we came in $650,000 ahead. So the net to increase to the bottom line was about $2.7 million for that. CARES funding, we didn't have a projected increase or decrease because we didn't know it was coming. So that's about a $1.1 million increase. Property tax, we expected to go down about $685,000, but it ended up being down about $260,000. So that's a $425,000 increase to the bottom line. So from the revenue side, we had about $4.275 million in increases to the bottom line than we had projected back in March with the March financials. So in summary, that gave us the 1.7 from expenditures, the 4.3 from revenues, and it's so a roughly $6 million increase to the bottom line from the original March projections or March 31st financial projections that we did back in April of 2020. So one of the numbers we wanted to look at, because this was a huge decision point for you and for, had probably the most effect on services and the city in general, was the personnel savings. So in full-time savings, we recognized about $1.5 million in savings. Part-time salaries, we anticipated about $830,000 originally. That number came in at $780,000. Overtime, $330,000 in savings. These are all from the original budget, and I will give credit to the PD for this. When they changed their schedules to 10-hour schedules, their savings alone was about $200,000. Longevity, we had a little bit of savings. The rest of these are benefits that would be provided to as related to some of the other expenditures. The leave buyout one, which is kind of confusing, is we budget in HR's budget for buyouts that aren't expensed in the department at the department level. So this is kind of the wash for any of those that aren't expensed in the department level, and we did not use about $264,000 of that. In looking at salaries, we had to kind of just try to figure out, well, why did we have those? Well, we know work share and furloughs were a huge part of that. We know that overtime reduction was a lot of that, but what we also noticed was that we had a lower overall staffing levels. So the table on the right-hand side, on the upper right-hand side, compares the 2019 general fund staffing levels to the 2020 general fund staffing levels by quarter. And if you look at the third, we would anticipate the second quarter was down because that's when we had all the furloughs and all the work share. But still in the third quarter and the fourth quarter of 2020, we were down 13 positions in the general fund. So that's a huge amount of money of savings that we were getting because of those positions were not filled. The other big savings that we noticed that from the numbers before were in contractual savings. We weren't changing these projections because, as I mentioned, departments had the authority to spend this money up to the point that they had told us previously that they were going to reduce that budget. So we really were not comfortable going any lower than that. So what we looked at was the top 10 categories in contractual services that generated the $7 million savings on the prior pages. Of that, other contractual was the highest savings number, about $243,000. And looking at that, animal services and municipal court were big contributors to that. Agency contracts for transportation, this is the $202,000 fourth quarter payment from OCCK. Employee development, which is not a surprise, we had halted most training was canceled due to COVID, but that number came in high. And then the rest of these kind of just show you as a list of where those top 10 fell in the overall savings under contractual services. So this slide is one that we've been showing you all along, and it just kind of shows us month to month where we were sitting at the time that we actually provided data. So for example, as of period 6, which would have been June, we were anticipating a net income at the very bottom line of $10.8 million. Of course, we knew at that point, we didn't know really what was going on. So these numbers are just providing us a month by month view of what we're seeing at the end of the year, which gets us to that final net income number that we're showing today of $5.9 million. Something that we discussed over and over was sales and use tax. So the next couple of slides are the slides that we've been looking at over and over since March, kind of comparing where our sales tax was coming in compared to where we would have anticipated it to come in based on the 3-year average. 3-year average was 2017, 18, and 19. So for example, as you can see in this spreadsheet, the sporting goods, hobbies, and musical instruments came in at 123% higher than our 3-year average in November and 104% higher in December. And so those numbers kind of tell us where the sales tax numbers were peaking and where they were down. And these are not surprising numbers to us. As we know, traveler accommodations was down 78%. That's probably higher than we anticipated they would get by the end of the year. But that is still significantly lower than what we've seen over the past 3 years. So overall, we saw ups and downs. What we did see, this is the sales tax side of it. What we did see was on the use tax, that those numbers were increasing significantly from prior years. So that's really what kind of took us over the top from some of these reductions. That original one was this should be pretty much the same slide because we're now comparing this, instead of this yellow number being what we anticipated based on the prior year. This number's not even on this one, so sorry. These numbers are the same numbers on both slides. So this is just when we were doing our COVID projection. We were anticipating, for example, this was the number I was telling you. Back when we did our original projections, we thought that the traveler accommodations would come in at about 60% of what they had previously collected. And on this schedule, as we can see, they came in at 78%. So those numbers did come in better than we anticipated. So that just kind of gives us a comparison of what we anticipated those would be in our COVID projections and what they actually came in to be at the end of the year. These are the graphs that I think really show the picture. They're much easier to look at. So basically the green lines on these are what we originally budgeted. The blue line is what we came in at as our actual year-to-date total for 2020. And the red line is what we were projecting at during our 3/31 financial statement COVID projection. So as you can see, for property tax, we were just a little bit under what we originally budgeted, but we were well over what we were projecting in the COVID scenarios. Motor vehicle tax came in pretty much exactly where we budgeted, but still higher than what we were projecting in our COVID projections. Franchise fees came in about the same as our projection as our year-to-date, but below what our original budget was. These two spikes, just for your information, is we originally budget that transfer of franchise fees from utilities in November, and we did it in April. So that's really what that flip-flop there is, just because that's an anomaly in this graph. EMS came in both below the original budget and below COVID projections, as did municipal court. Sorry, lost that. It too came in well below our original budget, but it did come in a little bit above what we were projecting originally back in March. And I will say that after talking to municipal court, something that helped them was the stimulus payment, because they did say they did have people that would come in and pay off some of their debt because they got that extra payment. So I think that helped them get to that number. Sales and use tax, as you can see, came in well above what we originally projected. And above what we originally budgeted. Something that's interesting is this is a 10-year, actually it's a 4-year month-to-month collection of sales tax. So what you can see is our sales tax is pretty flat. It's not, for the most part, it's not going very much. These spikes are really cyclical based on times of the year when there's higher spending, because the February time is the holidays. And usually the August, September time is back to school time. So those numbers are typically higher in those numbers. But these are the numbers that are going crazy is the use tax. And if you may or may not recall, back in October of 2019, the state implemented collection of use tax on computer sales. And so that's what we're really seeing here is that collection of use tax on computer sales that's helping drive our use tax numbers up. Now, granted, they're a pretty small proportion to what our sales tax numbers are. So the dollars aren't significant, but the percentages are fairly significant if you look at those. So this is just a really a recap of where we, item by item, where we thought these items would be and how they finished out based on that information from the year end to the 3/31 financials. So as I mentioned earlier, we had projected $39 million of revenues. We came in at $43.5 million of revenues. We noted that our property tax, sales tax, and grant revenue was up. Our EMS fees and charges and interest and investment income was down. The comparison is we were up about $400,000 in property tax from what we projected on the March 31st financials. We were up about $2.8 million from what we projected in sales tax. We were down about $180,000 in EMS. We were down about $58,000 in fees and charges, and we're down about $100,000 in investment income, which that number should go down a little bit, not significantly because we have not posted the December number yet. On the expenditure side, we were originally projecting back on the March 31st financials, expenses about $39.4 million. We came in about $37.6 million. We came in below on personnel, commodities, contractual service, and capital outlay, pretty much every line item except for other expenses. But so in the personnel services, between the projection in March and the actual was a difference of about $250,000, $160,000 for employee benefits, $390,000 for commodities, $767,000 for contractual services, and $156,500 for capital outlay. So that's the general fund. Does anybody have questions, comments, want to talk about that, or you want to just keep going through and then we'll talk about everything at the end?
Fine with plowing through unless someone has a question that they'd like to ask now.
Okay. So then we took a look at all other funds, and we've tried to provide this information, but we haven't provided this monthly. So this might be a look at some of these that you haven't seen for a while. The Arts and Humanities Fund, this total ending fund balance is without the transfer. So as you can see, when we make that $517,000 transfer, that's going to should bring that fund up to about its target fund balance of $100,000. We originally budgeted a loss of a little over $20,000 due to the revenue reductions from the River Festival. We came in at a net loss of about $467,000.
But that $20,000 loss included the transfer, is that correct?
It did.
Okay,
We
so
were anticipating.
those two numbers are really, just looking at the 20,000 with the other 466,000 is a little bit misleading.
Yes.
One includes the general fund and one does not.
Right. Yes, if that revenue wasn't here, that this number would be $665,000 loss. That's true. But we also didn't have a lot of the expenses that we would have had with the River Festival either. The sales tax capital fund, this should have been the page that you got emailed this morning, hopefully, because there was a typo on this one. In the budget column, we had this number duplicated, so it was showing that we anticipated $16 million in revenue, which would have been great, but it's not accurate. So in the sales tax capital fund, our revenues came in just a little about $365,000 over what it did last year. It did come in about $300,000 over what we budgeted. The $176,000 of other revenue was FF&E projects that we did through the sales tax fund. In expenditures, we originally budgeted about $8.2 million. With the reductions of projects that we did, that number came in about $5.5 million, leaving a net income of about $3.4 million in this fund and a fund balance of about $5 million. The thing we want to note and remind you is of the things that we canceled when we did this. The reductions in the sales tax fund were broken out like this: in capital planning, $50,000, buildings and facilities, $30,000, vehicles and equipment, $900,000, and streets about $1.5 million. This list on the right-hand side is a compilation of these two items, building and facility and vehicles and equipment. So those are items that we chose not to do in 2020 because of COVID. Some of these items, probably a lot of them, came back up on the 2021 request, so we might be addressing those now, but some of them didn't, so we might not be addressing those in the 2021 budget. The other thing we have to remember when looking at the sales tax capital fund, because we think we have $5 million in there, is we do have a lot of promises in the, I don't know what word to use, it's not really commitment, but it's a promise that this is what we're going to spend this money on. So I wanted to show you what we have budgeted in 2021. We have streetscape debt, we have river renewal debt, we have river renewal projects coming that we haven't even financed yet. We have 3.9% to economic development. We have Kenwood Cove maintenance that we've obligated. We have capital equipment that we normally budget about $930,000. We have streets improvements that we budget at $3.2 million. We have buildings and facilities maintenance and CIP planning that we budget at $370,000. We have parks maintenance projects for $500,000, a hike bike trail for $50,000, and the general fund tax stabilization of about $1 million. So that's just a reminder of where we are for 2021 in that fund. The other thing that I thought was important to remember is this list is the list of vehicles and equipment that was requested in 2021 that was not funded because we didn't have enough budget to do so. And if you look at that, that number is about $1.8 million. And that's 1 year of vehicles and equipment that either were brought over from 2020 and not purchased, or did not get funded in 2021 because we only had $930,000 to work with in that fund. So I just think it's important to realize that we have a lot of equipment and maintenance that needs to be done, that we may want to look at addressing with some of the surplus, but that's a discussion we'll have here in a bit. Sales tax economic development fund did fine. It's got a revenue of about $7,000. We anticipated it to be a loss, but with the reduction of expenses in this fund, we were able to come out with a little bit extra. Fund balance is $750,000. Is the target. We ended up with 715. I will say we do have a couple projects in this fund that have not come out yet. Possibilities of coming out of this fund with the Schwann's projects. I just wanted to note, because there was a significant difference between the expenditures in 19 and 20. We did have some expenses in 19 that we won't repeat in future years unless we approve them as standalone items. The next slides are really pass-through slides, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on Business Improvement District or the tourism and convention. The only note I will make on tourism and convention is that you can see the revenues are significantly down from last year, about $600,000 from what we collected last year, and about the same from what we budgeted for last year. And what's paid out is exactly what comes in for that fund, because it's just a pass-through fund. Special Parks and Recreation, because we did not spend very much in that budgeted line item, we didn't collect as much as we normally would. But we are still able to increase that fund balance to $465,000 at the end of the year. Special alcohol. This is a fund that is also a pass-through fund that goes to special parks and goes to some of the alcohol rehabilitation services in the community. So this one's just a pass-through. Special gas is one that we transferred several projects into this fund from sales tax when we weren't sure where that fund was going to end. Because this fund had a $1.8 million balance at the end of 2019. We did end up doing a budget revision on this fund. So when we revised our budget, we came in under that revised budget of about $200,000. Our revenue did come in higher, and the reason for that is because we got a significant amount more revenue from federal fund exchange dollars than we had in previous years. There was about $400,000 more than what we normally got in the previous years. Like I said, we did take several larger projects out of this fund from the sales tax fund. Neighborhood parks is another. These are funds that we don't really do much with unless we have specific projects that we are geared toward a specific neighborhood. The Parks Department does look at projects that they can do out of funds in that project. Tony's Pizza Event Center. This one's a little deceiving because we did receive the $175,000 for upgrades from Spectra. And so that's showing in the revenue, but I also took that out of the bottom I took that out as a reserve for capital improvements from the fund balance so that we wouldn't think that we had that money in there to spend or to buy things that we might be looking at buying for this fund. You can see the expenditures are higher than what it was last year by about $50,000. And that's directly related to the reduction in revenue because we reimburse them based on their net revenue versus expenses on a month-to-month basis. So when the revenue goes down, their expenses go up. And this one too, that I mentioned earlier, we'll probably have to do some sort of transfer to this fund in 2021, depending on how things move back up and they're able to start planning and getting programs back at the Tony Pizza Event Center. Sanitation fund, revenues came in just a little under or over what we did in 2019, a little bit under what we had budgeted. Expenditures came in a little bit under what we had budgeted, as well as a little bit under what we had done in 2019. They did participate in work share, so that's a significant amount of that. And also we delayed the automated trucks, so there was some capital outlay purchases that were not done in 2020. Leaving this fund balance about $2.1 million at the end of 2020. Solid waste revenues came in under what we actually collected in 2019, a bit above what we budgeted in 2020. Revenues came in about $500,000 less than what we anticipated. That again was in capital outlay. There was a lot of equipment that we didn't purchase because of COVID. We postponed those purchases, leaving their fund balance at the end of the year about $5.4 million. The golf course, we originally budgeted about $900,000 of revenue. That came in about $680,000. And it also came in about $227,000 less than what we had collected in prior years. The expenses came in under what was budgeted also, and also under what was previously spent. However, they did come into a negative net loss position with their fund balance originally at a little over $21,000. That left them a negative $47,500 fund balance. So we did transfer $100,000 into this fund so that they could at least get to the point where they could have cash flow for the first few months of the year.
Deb, has that transfer been affected already? Is that already out of the general fund?
It is. The transfers are out of the general fund, but they're not in the other two funds and in these reports.
Okay.
Because I wanted to show you where they ended up. Water and wastewater, revenues came in a little bit under what we collected before and under what we would have anticipated to collect in our original budget. Same with expenditures, came in under. Those two were, there were some labor and capital outlay projects that were not included. Oh, sorry, flip to the next page. No wonder those numbers didn't make sense. Leaving them with a net income of about 2.8 million and a fund balance of about $15 million. Central garage revenues came in under what we received last year, and so did revenues or expenditures, but they were able to maintain a net income of 159,000, added to their beginning fund balance of 154,000, left them with a fund balance of about 313,000 at the end of the year. Workers' comp, we budgeted 455,000 in revenue. We transferred 449,000 in revenue. Expenses were 370,000. We had budgeted 430, so that was about a $50,000 difference or $60,000 difference, leaving this fund with a net income of about 79,000 and an ending fund balance of a little over $1 million. The health insurance fund, we've talked about this fund multiple times. Revenues came in above 2019, below what we originally budgeted. The expenditures came in below what we had budgeted and significantly below what we had incurred last year. We've had this conversation about whether that's due to postponed medical care or what that is. But in the end, it allowed this fund to recognize a net income of about $1 million, leaving the ending fund balance of about $3.2 million. The bond and interest fund, this one's a little deceiving in when you look at the numbers, because we did have a refunding in 2020. So in the net proceeds, the debt service proceeds revenue, we have about $1.18 million of refunded bonds. And in the debt service, we have the same number of payouts that we paid off the old debt. We did talk to the auditors about how to present this information, how to post this information. We've had some conversations about maybe splitting that out so it's a little bit easier to see. Maybe creating a line item for refunding revenues and refunding expenditures. What I noted back in early November when we were doing amended budgets was that this created a budget overage to what we had originally budgeted. In conversation with them, their response was that because it was a refunding, it would not be applied to the budget when they look at the budget to see if there's a violation. So with that 1.18 out of the $7 million, that brings our revenue, our expenses down to about 5.9 million, which brings us under our budgeted number. This is going to be one of those transactions that could be changed during the audit process. So we may look at that. It shouldn't change the net income effect because the revenue and the expenses were exactly the same. Leaving this fund balance with about $1.6 million. What I wanted to note was, as part of the accounting process for projects, when a project is completed and closed out in the project fund, we have to do a reconciliation to make sure that we funded in the revenue side enough money to pay for all the expenses, which sounds simple, but it's not always because there's a lot of issuance costs and costs besides just project costs. So once we get that reconciliation done, we may have to do some adjustments into the debt service fund because they're all funded through the debt service fund. I added this graph because I've had this question asked to me multiple times as we talk about these things, where our unemployment is. As you can see on the top graph, our unemployment rested somewhere around 3%, a little under or above 3%. Until we got to 2020, where it went above 9%. Today in May, or In November of 2020, it's just below 5% or right above 5%. So I think we're still seeing some movement in that, but it certainly has not come down to where we were pre-COVID. So this is something we still need to be cognizant of and be aware that these numbers could change. I mean, it's gonna affect us for a long time.
That being said, that unemployment number certainly came back a lot faster than many of the predictions that we were hearing early in the year. You know, some of them were saying it was going to stay at that 8-9% level for the indefinite future, and that's
Right.
part of probably what helped us.
I would guess that unemployment is significant in the, like the travel and the entertainment, wouldn't you say?
There, and even in the utility fund for payments of utility bills, property.
But I mean,
taxes.
as far, yeah,
Yeah, as far as the sales tax, I think that's probably the highest because it's probably the most, the area where people could let go of.
Yeah, I think Commissioner Hoppeck's referring to what sectors are experiencing
or
unemployment.
experiencing it, yeah.
Oh, yes, I would agree.
Yeah, because we've got pent up employment requirement now. I mean, we need, I mean, there's companies out there looking for employees, so.
Right.
Well,
I think
one
it's-
point that Eric Brown with the chamber makes is, as you apply that percentage to the number of employable individuals seeking work in Saline County, it may sound like a high percentage. The actual number of people searching for a job is not that high relative to, the openings that we have that we're trying to fill in the community. But I think it is related that, you have unemployment in one sector and they may not be transferable to another.
Right.
Yeah. I did read that too, that the accommodation sector was one of the hardest hit sectors with the employment numbers. The last thing we wanted to update you on was where the Star Bond District ended at the end of the year. So this slide shows what our collections were for 2020. The number in this row is what the state collected for state sales tax. This is the base we were trying to meet. So as we collected money, we got to the point where we've collected more money than the base. So in November of 2020, we were actually sending money or holding money for the Star Bond District. Same with the local tax, which in these numbers include both city and county. They made an adjustment in October because of a calculation error. So in October, the end of September, the beginning of October, we were actually able to send money to the district. All in all, we collected $1.7 million from the state over a base of 1.4 million, leaving us a balance of about 325,000. In local taxes, we collected about 498,000 over a base of 348,000, which left us a surplus of about 150,000. We also collected $21,000 in transient guest tax. This is off the hotel downtown only because that's the only thing in that district. And it didn't open until late July or something like that. So that number, we would have only collected 1/4 worth of payments for that transient guest tax. As compared to what we projected in the revenue study back from 2018, we collected about 63% of state sales tax, 62% of local tax, and about 8% of transient guest tax. The important thing to remember is these larger entities didn't open until late in 2020. So we're hoping that those numbers are going to move to the left so that our numbers are going to be meeting the baseline earlier in the year. But this kind of gives you kind of a half year or less picture of what happened once they did open and in COVID. So that kind of gives you those numbers. This is just an overview of where everything stands in the Star Bonds. The schedule here is what's on hand at the trustee. The city of Salina has about $886,000 still sitting there. The majority of that is for the off-site parking for the field house. The hotel master developer has their funds still sitting there, waiting till they submit their cost estimates. The car museum has about 3.4 million. Stiefel has about $247,000, and the hotel for their infrastructure has about $1 million. So there's about $6 million left at the trustee in project funds. And I believe that those have to be submitted. I'm thinking off the top of my head, I think it's October of 2021. I'll have to double check that though.
And the significance of showing that there's nothing in escrow is that the escrow conditions have been met. They've been released by the trustee, so they're available for distribution once the other requirements are met.
Correct. The sales tax, the state collections actually sit at the state until the trustee requests them for debt payment. So currently we have $325,000 sitting at the state. We used a little portion of that from 2019 to pay off a payment in 2020. The debt funds that we still have sitting out there, the capitalized interest account has been utilized for payments to this date. The debt service reserve account has about $1.4 million in it. The other two debt funds are really just the funds that money goes in and out of for debt payments. The required payments for 2021 are $904,000. In incremental tax, we currently have about 502. It's the 325 from the state shown here, and the 195 from the county or the city tax that's sitting at the trustee.
Something I noted is, and you were just about there, is the payments required in 2021 is that $900,000 number.
Yep.
But there's also a $5.5 million balloon payment coming in 2030, and that works out to about a $550,000 a year obligation that by 2030 we're going to have covered somehow.
Yes, that's true. So this federal is required.
I'm sorry, just so I understand that, what you're saying, Commissioner France, is we've got the $900,000 in payment obligations for this year, but if we're looking ahead, we should be putting we should be adding another $500,000 to that in anticipation of the 2030 obligation.
By 2030, we would hope that would happen. Obviously, up front, early on, you might be a little short of that.
Right.
But if you're a little short of it up front, then you got to have surpluses in the back half in order to meet that. So that's something, to carry as we look forward, because if we get to 2029 and we don't have that money, the payments still coming due.
Thank you.
And just to be clear, it is not a full obligation of the city. So then there's also provision for if we're unable to make that payment, deferred payment or missed payments, and that goes back to the bondholders.
Okay, I got you, because we didn't underwrite the bonds. Okay, I got
Right.
you.
Correct.
Thank you.
So that's what this table really just shows us, that the required payments are interest payments only until we get to 2030. As Commissioner France said, I wanted to note here what had paid those. We used capitalized interest for the first 3 payments, 4 payments really. We used some incremental sales tax and transit gas tax. We anticipate using the balance from the incremental sales tax from 2020 for the June 1st payment. And then hopefully by the December 1st payment, we'll have the remainder of the 2021 incremental tax or 2020 incremental tax and some additional 2021 incremental sales tax. And this scenario does not touch the debt service reserve of $1.4 million that I showed on the previous screen for these payments. So that's kind of the hope as far as where we go with this. But we'll continue to update this and provide this information as these payments become due and as the sales tax comes in. This is just a continuation of payment just to show you when those actual principal payments do become due in 30, 32, 35, and 38. That's a lot of numbers, and there's a lot of information there, so I wanted to leave plenty of time for conversation, questions, comments, further information.
Trying to see if I can expand my view so I can even see who's on here. There we go. Oh, welcome, Commissioner Ryan. I didn't have enough viewing boxes, so I don't know when you're able to join in. But do any commissioners have questions, comments?
Commissioner Davis, one question. Are we anticipating that any future funding increases for the general fund balance would be minimal in the next few years compared to last year's, I don't want to call it a windfall, but unexpected increase?
Yeah.
Right, go ahead, Debbie.
I was gonna say, as you can see by what we budgeted in 2020, our margin is very small in the general fund from what we anticipate to what our expenditures are. And I don't anticipate, unless there's future stimulus money that comes along, which there's talk, but there's no confirmation on that. We have not typically been able to budget with a lot of cushion.
And
Yeah,
go ahead.
I guess I would add to that. I don't know how many years running we've attempted to budget to have $500,000 of net income to then apply to our general fund balance to reach our target. So, I think some of the first things for us to talk about, we don't have to make the decisions today, but talking points going forward are that fund balance, what's the appropriate fund balance, what we deferred in 2020 that we want to pick back up. And Debbie spoke to that to some degree. I mean, obviously we park and rec programming and mowing and maintenance are things that we made a noticeable reduction in 2020. I don't know in the general fund that we deferred anything that was overly harmful. Now on the sales tax side, Debbie touched on capital improvements and vehicles and equipment, those type of things, as well as kind of the street projects. So I think we probably want to talk about picking those back up. And then I think that leaves some funds that were unexpected that we can factor into our strategic planning conversations. But I don't, long term, I'm encouraged by the sales tax growth. But again, the question is that atypical because of the stimulus money that came into our economy? And if we get back to normal, our typical year is very much break even with not a lot left over.
Right. And have the contractual services that we saved on last year, have they been reviewed to see how many of those savings can be ongoing, or did we just bite the bullet last year and get by on bare minimum?
Yeah, now that we've finished the year, we started with the kind of that overview that Debbie provided, but we have discussed diving into greater detail and trying to identify where those savings were and whether we can continue those on both contractual services and commodities. Some things were most definitely, something that we just was foregone for the year and we knew we'd have to get back to. But if we can capture any of those savings, we'll definitely try to do that.
And so that's where you anticipate some strategic planning discussions coming into play in terms of what we're going to go ahead and restore the funding to. And
yeah,
I know that you've been particularly concerned about the fact that we don't have any kind of a replacement cycle for a lot of our equipment. And the thing that I don't want to happen is that we do realize this kind of this one-time windfall, but then we just put ourselves further and further behind in terms of what we've got to buy in the future and what we've got to do to upgrade our fleet in the future.
No, I completely agree. And unless we can identify a few things to carry forward on an ongoing basis, a lot of this is one time. And so as we make decisions about its use, we need to bear that in mind. And vehicles and equipment is a recurring expense that we struggle with. We're looking at other options completely offline of the 2020 numbers that maybe we can make some headway there. But in terms of the strategic planning discussion, I think it's twofold. One is, are there opportunities to continue those savings? The other is, if we're comfortable that we do have some funds that could be utilized, then where do we want to utilize them as really kind of a one-time expenditure?
Gotcha. Thank you. Anyone else? And do we have any members of the public that have a question? I don't think I see anybody on here except for commission and staff.
I know in the background, staff's been struggling a little bit with some functionality, but I think Lauren Driscoll looks like she's muted. And I know Jacob Wood has been providing some support remotely as well, but I'll defer to Lauren, and I don't know if Jacob's still on the line or not, to see if we have any public. Lauren is shaking her head no while muted, so I think the answer is no.
Okay.
You know, I would like to make a couple of comments. I think it's very incumbent that we have a very deliberate conversation about how to proceed with this. We're obviously, you know, we obviously took some pretty drastic actions last spring in response to some pretty drastic outlooks for the future. And we're fortunate that those did not come fully into play, and that puts us in a good position now in terms of moving forward. But I think we need to be very careful and deliberate about how we approach that. I do think we need to have the conversation eventually, and depending on a little bit of how the pandemic goes, about, you know, summer program restoration under what conditions. And if the pandemic is such that we think we can do that with maybe some extra precautions, I would certainly be in favor of doing that, at least to some level, even if it may cost us a little bit extra to do it, in order to just have the programs again. Obviously, if the pandemic stays out of control and we keep having high levels of case counts, we're not going to be able to do that. But I think that's something we need to keep in our cap. I will say, and I don't want any of you to faint dead away, but I am pleased to see the golf course results. I mean, I know we had to supplement it, but you know, given the conditions, I think that they did a pretty good job of managing the resources they had available. And I see Brad here. I think our Humanities did the same. The fact that we have to supplement them less than we would in a normal year, I think should be a feather in their cap. So I know we had some employees who worked very, very hard to make this happen. But those two independent funds come to mind, you know, and of course the general fund people also kicked in a big way. And as a result, we're now in a position of being able to move forward with maybe a little bit more flexibility than we would have had we not taken the magnitude of actions we took last spring. I know it was hard at the time, and you know, it was upsetting to a number of folks, but you know, I would rather be in the situation we're in than be looking at a $2 million fund balance and thinking, oh my God, how am I going to deal with this? You know, so whatever.
Commissioner Francis' comments remind me that, you know, we're not out of the woods. We still have to see how this plays itself out. And you may have already seen that we're advertising for lifeguards at Kenwood Cove. The timing is such that we need to get started on that. Well, staff's working through what that might look like if we have capacity limits. And to some extent, whatever extent we can practically enforce social distancing. So if that is the model, then we would most likely be operating Kenwood Cove at a deficit in 2021 just to be able to have it open. Similarly, you know, we've had some conversations about the field house, and we'll see what the pandemic brings. I think as we compare ourselves to our peer communities and as our citizens and constituents compare ourselves, we have been very conservative in terms of our operation of the golf course, our operation of Kenwood Cove, our financial approach. And you know, we're seeing the results of that financially. As Commissioner Franz said, we've got some flexibility rather than find ourselves painted into a corner. So, but we'll continue to monitor. You know, we're having conversations, and you should see a study session on your agenda planner here in the near future to talk about the River Festival and what that might look like in 2021. Brad and his staff did a great job making a very hard decision in 2020, and they're out ahead of that whole conversation again. So we'll continue to monitor and assess.
Thank you. Anyone else? If not, I guess that we will be adjourned early, and we'll see you back here at 4 o'clock.
All right. We didn't know how much
Nothing
conversation
else.
to anticipate, so it sounds good.
Okay.
Could
Thanks.
we just turn off cameras and, I mean, stay connected, but just turn off the camera and sound?
Yep, and I'll mute everybody.
All right, thank
Oh,
you.
thank goodness.
If anything breaks down, go back to that same link and we'll restart. But
Gotcha. Thank you, Lauren. Is anybody else unmuted?
I am.
Great.
I am.
All right, guess
I'm
I'm
working
here.
my way through the list.
All right. I see all the commissioners, and I'm assuming that you can hear okay. I think I heard from Commissioner Davis.
Yep.
I think I heard Commissioner Ryan in there as well.
Yes.
Okay,
And here,
fantastic. Well, we're almost ready to go.
Madam Mayor, I think I have everybody who needs to be unmuted for the meeting unmuted to start.
Thank you so much, Lauren. I think you do too. They've all confirmed here. So with that, it's 4 o'clock, and I will call the January 25th, 2021 Salina City Commission meeting to order. First, I'd like to confirm with staff that the Kansas Open Meeting Act required notice has been properly provided. Oops.
You're muted, Mike.
I sent a request to unmute Debbie. There we go.
Now you're good.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much, Cheryl. With that, we will proceed to roll call.
Commissioner Davis,
Here,
Commissioner France,
There.
Commissioner Hoppick,
here,
Commissioner Ryan,
Here.
Mayor Hodges.
Here. Would you please join me for a moment of silence? Thank you. All right, with that, I don't know when we do the tutorials for participating in a Zoom meeting in the Zoom format that we're now using for Salina City Commission meetings. We can do that now, or we can wait till after the awards and proclamations. I think we usually do it at the beginning of the meeting. Is that correct?
I believe so, and I do have it pulled up to go through.
Okay, great. I will turn it over to Ms. Driscoll.
Great. Okay. If you are participating in public comment today, please be aware of the different ways in which you can participate. If you are working from a PC, you'll see at the bottom of your screen, there is an icon, looks like little people. It says participate. You're going to need to click there. And then if you are participating and need to indicate that, there's another button to the far right corner. If you are on an iPad, you'll notice those same icons are up in the upper right-hand corner. And you'll be able to see by clicking that who is participating in the meeting. You'll be able to indicate yourself by clicking on your name. And there's a raise hand button when you click on your name. You can also click the more button to get additional features. And you'll see the raise your hand button there as well. There is a chat feature, and that is located at the bottom, also near those participant icons. I will also note that we have a phone number. If you called in by phone, you need to dial *9, and that will indicate that you want to raise your hand. I think that just about covers it, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Ms. Driscoll. Do we have that phone number?
We do. That phone number is going to be 1-346-248-7799 with meeting ID number 892-7598-4587.
It just rolls right off the tongue, doesn't it?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you for the orientation. With that, we will move to awards and proclamations.
Item 3.1, the month of January 2021 as National Stalking Awareness Month in the city of Salina. Abby Hunter, Victim Advocate with DVAC, will read the proclamation.
Good afternoon, City of Salina. Hello. All right, I'll dive right in. National Stalking Awareness Month Proclamation, January 2021. Whereas stalking is intentional harassment, a pattern of behavior directed at a specific person, causing that person to feel fear and endangerment for themselves or their family. The variation in stalking behavior ranges from hang-up phone calls to more direct threats toward a victim. The likelihood of injury increases when the stalking behavior escalates over time. Whereas under the laws of Saline County, Kansas, and all jurisdictions in the US, stalking is a crime. Whereas the majority of victims are stalked by someone they know, typically an ex-dating partner or acquaintance, and 3 in 4 women.
Is it just I'm sorry to interrupt. Is it just my audio or is anybody else having trouble picking up Miss Hunter?
We lost her.
I think we lost her. Okay. Miss Hunter, are you there?
I'm here. Can you hear me now?
You want to try turning up the audio on your device?
I think I might have, but I'm not sure.
I am having such trouble hearing. Is that a problem for anyone else?
Yeah.
Very faint.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
And they are unmuted. I think it's an audio issue.
Okay. Ms. Hunter, would it be okay with you if I picked up reading the proclamation? I need to take that away and I will come back to you after it's finished to see what activities you have planned, but I do want your message to get out there. Let's see. I think I may be repeating just a couple of things. Whereas the majority of victims are stalked by someone they know, typically an ex-dating partner or acquaintance, and 3 in 4 women killed by an intimate partner have been stalked by that same intimate partner. Whereas the Kansas Bureau of Investigation reports that 190 protection from stalking orders were filed in Saline County in 2018. Whereas the statistics do not represent the true incidence and prevalence of stalking for multiple reasons, including not all victims report the crime to law enforcement, and stalking is a tactic of domestic violence and sexual abuse, so it may not be reported as the primary form of abuse and victimization, although the victim has experienced stalking along with other forms of abuse. Whereas many stalking victims are forced to protect themselves by relocating, changing their identities, changing jobs, and obtaining protection orders. Whereas many stalking victims lose time from work and experience serious psychological distress and lost productivity at a much higher rate than the general population. Whereas communities can better combat stalking by raising awareness, adopting multidisciplinary responses by teams of local agencies and organizations, and providing more and better victim services. And now, therefore, the City of Salina Board of Commissioners does hereby proclaim January 2021 as National Stalking Awareness Month. Signed this 25th day of January 2021. So I'm so sorry to have hijacked that, and I don't know that we can hear you yet, but do you have any virtual or in-person activities or awareness things going on? Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry.
Would it help if she disconnected and just rejoined?
Yeah, let's try that. Absolutely.
Madam Mayor, if that doesn't work, I believe Angela had raised her hand, was indicating she could give additional information.
Okay.
Yes. Hi, is everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, we do have different activities going on this week on Facebook Live. There'll be some stuff on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday that will be addressing these topics on Facebook Live on the DVAC website. For the National Slavery and Human Trafficking Prevention Month proclamation of January 2021, whereas millions of men and women and children are victims of human trafficking, which is the second largest and fastest growing criminal industry in the world. Whereas human trafficking denies victims basic human dignity and freedom and is based on recruiting, harboring, and transporting people through the use of force, fraud, and other coercion for the purpose of sexual exploitation or forced labor. It is a crime that can take many forms and tears at our social fabric. Debases our community, humanity, and violates what we stand for as a country. Whereas traffickers frequently target victims and then use violence, threats, lies, false promises, debt bondage, or other forms of control and manipulation to force victims to work against their will or to keep victims involved in the commercial sexual exploitation. Whereas in the U.S., Justice Department has identified Kansas as an originating state for human trafficking, and most trafficking in Kansas involves local children. Whereas with improved victim identification, medical and social services, training for first responders, and increased public awareness, the victims who have suffered this cruel crime can overcome the bonds of modern slavery, received protection and justice, and successfully reclaim their rightful independence. And whereas the Domestic Violence Association of Central Kansas is joining forces with victim service providers, criminal justice officials, and concerned citizens throughout Central Kansas and the United States to observe National Slavery and Human Trafficking Prevention Month. Together, we can commit to a society where our sense of justice tells us, united, we can eradicate this wrong and continue to fight for human dignity and the rights of every person. Now, therefore, the City of Salina Board of Commissioners hereby proclaims January 2021 the National Slavery and Human Trafficking Prevention Month and applauds the efforts as many victim providers, police officers, prosecutors, national and community organizations, and private sector supporters for their efforts in opposing human trafficking in all of its forms.
Thank you, Ms.
Thank
White.
you.
That's such disappointing, I guess is an understatement, data that Kansas is an originating state for human trafficking, because, you know, my biases think that, you know, Kansas is in the middle of the country and it can't happen here, but I guess you show that it can happen anywhere.
Yes.
And you
Especially
said,
with the highway interchanges, like I-70 and I-35.
Gotcha. And so if folks go to the DVAC Facebook page, you will have Facebook Live events on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday.
Yes, ma'am.
For both National Slavery and Human Trafficking Prevention Month and Stalking Awareness as well.
Yes.
All right. Well, thank you very much. We'll
Thank
get that
you.
nice proclamation for you.
Mayor Hodges, if I could double back just a little bit, the guidance that we've received about public comment is that we should also advise how we conduct executive session. And so we skipped over that as we talked about how to participate in citizens forum, and I'd like to touch base there if I may.
Absolutely. Thank you.
I think it's pretty straightforward. As we go into an executive session, the meeting host is able to create a side room that the selected individuals that are participating in the executive session are able to log into that. Everyone else that's on the Zoom call just can stay put. The call will stay active. When the executive session is concluded, those that participate in the executive session will return to that main meeting and we'll pick up where we left off. So much like we would physically leave the room and allow people to stay in the main room, in a Zoom atmosphere, we will leave the main Zoom meeting room, convene a smaller group in a side room, and then return to the main meeting. The public participants don't have to log back on. They just need to sit tight while the executive session is occurring elsewhere.
Mayor Hodges, thank you very much. Mr. Scragg, I appreciate that clarification. And I've been forgetting to identify myself the entire meeting. With that, we will move on to Citizens Forum. Citizens Forum is an opportunity for the public to be heard on any item that is not on today's agenda. Please limit your comments or questions to 5 minutes. And I'll look to staff to see if we have any members of the public that are raising their, I'm not even sure I'm seeing any members of the public at all, am I?
Oh, there's one.
Okay. If you would like to speak, raise your virtual hand and staff will get you unmuted.
Yeah, I see one there, phone number 201-2966.
Okay.
Looks like they're unmuted now.
Yeah, this is Drew Sprague. I live in Salina, Kansas.
I'm sorry.
1301.
I'm so sorry. You cut out there. If you could give us your name and where you're from.
Drew Sprague,
Okay, thank you.
here in Salina, 1301 East Minneapolis. And I would just like the commission to look at reopening the field house if possible. I know the COVID numbers are, I guess I haven't seen recently, but I think they're kind of staying at that level. I don't know if there's a dramatic increase from when we initially, like last week, maybe 2 weeks ago, you guys had brought it up to that the numbers were increasing, but since then I think they've kind of stayed the same at that number. I would just urge you guys to relook into it because cities like Wichita and bigger cities are having events at their field houses and they seem to be doing just fine. So I would appreciate if you guys would look into that for our youth community.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sprague. I think that Mr. Sprague has discussed that somewhat. He's done some research in light of our mass gathering limits and otherwise, I don't know if there's anything that you would like to share at this point, Mr. Sprague.
Sure, Mike Sprague here. I can give a little bit of kind of some recent history, that community conversation that occurred last week. And so, going back a little bit further, you as the governing body indicated that they made the decision to close the field house and indicated your willingness to reconsider opening the field house when numbers improved. And that conversation focused on active cases, hospitalizations, and deaths. And then last week, there was some discussion at the county commission level with the health director indicating initially possibly an intention to let the mass gathering health order expire, which would have expired midnight on Saturday night, I believe, of this past weekend. And then ultimately, he reached out to me and indicated that I guess had consulted others, reconsidered that health order, and was intending to extend it for 28 days, which is 2 14-day COVID cycles. And so it would extend from the 25th out another 28 days. So some of the conversation we were having at the staff level is your prior direction was to bring the question of field house opening back to you when the numbers looked like they had changed or improved, and that the initial intent to let the mass gathering expire might have been an indication of some positive indicators. That isn't necessarily the case. If you look at kind of active cases, they may have peaked and come off that peak just slightly, but the health director's point in his press release was it's really kind of too soon to tell whether that was just a fluctuation or whether we were starting into a positive trend when we essentially have just recently hit our all-time high. Mayor Hodges and I had a conversation, and she indicated that going forward, she would like me to be prepared to provide on a weekly basis an update. She didn't indicate an expectation that I would do that today, but I was able to speak with the health director, and he was able to forward over some numbers. So I have today's numbers. I don't necessarily have a basis of comparison to possibly a week prior, but what he reported is there's 5,400 active cases in Salina County, or have been. 3,435 of those had recovered. So I don't know that the math works out exactly right, but he reports 1,877 active cases. There have been 88 deaths and 78 new cases and 21 hospitalized. And so, as we go forward, what I'll try to do is be able to provide you a comparison possibly to the week prior, as well as be able to speak to hospital capacity compared to those that are hospitalized. But ultimately, you as a governing body have provided prior direction. If you want this item placed back on your agenda, if you want staff to provide additional information, we'd be happy to do either.
Thank
or
you,
both.
Mayor Hodges. Thank you very much, Mr. Scragg. My thought was in adding this to our order of business as a regular item in our order of business going forward is we lose a lot of viewership as we get deeper and deeper into the meeting and it goes on. And I think we'd all acknowledge that the pandemic is probably the single biggest driver that's motivating a lot of our policy decisions. And just an update from week to week, I think helps frame that and keep that in front of us. So thank you, Mr. Scragg. That was exactly what I had in mind. Is there anyone else on the phone for Citizens Forum?
Madam Mayor, I do not have any more hands raised.
Thank you very much, Ms. Driscoll. With that, we don't have any public hearings and items scheduled for a certain time. So that will bring us to item number 6, the consent agenda.
Item 6.1, approve the minutes of the January 11, 2021 meeting. Item 6.2, 2019 water main replacement projects numbers 1 and 2. Item 6.2A, award the contract for the 2019 water main replacement project number 1, project number 90039, KPWSLF project number 2997 to Stevens Contractors, Inc. of Salina, Kansas in the amount of $1,871,700, authorized with the 5% construction contingency of $1,965,285. Item 6.2B, award the contract for the 2019 water main replacement project number 2, project number 90039, KPWSLF project number 2997 to Smoky Hill LLC of Salina, Kansas in the amount of $1,998,324, authorized with a 5% construction contingency of $2,098,240.
Is Mayor Hodges, is there any item that a commissioner would like to remove from the consent agenda? Okay, I don't see any. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented?
Commissioner Hoppick here. I move that we approve consent agenda item 6.1, 6.2, 6.2A, and 6.2B.
Commissioner Davis.
Ryan, second.
We have a motion and a second to accept the consent agenda as presented. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 5-0, which will take us into administration. I don't know if we did the renumbering. Do we just go to item 7.2 or do the various numbers move themselves up in the hierarchy?
Given the timing of the change, we left the numbering the same and noted the removal of item 7.1, but it probably would be good just for the general public and for the record to note that item 7.1 has been removed from today's agenda, so we'll progress to item 7.2.
Item 7.2, consider resolution 21-7927, correcting resolution number 20-7910, adopted on December 21st, 2020, establishing water and wastewater rates effective February 1, 2021, in the comprehensive fee schedule of the city of Salina.
Ms. Pack?
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Commissioners. Debbie Pack, Director of Finance. The City Commission adopted Resolution 20-7910 in December of 2020. And in that presentation, the staff report recommended that all rates for the water and wastewater utilities be increased by 2%. As we were going to publish the comprehensive fee schedule in January, staff recognized that the recommended numbers on the staff report did not match up to what the attached resolution reflected. So today's action and request would be to replace the original resolution with a resolution that accurately reflects the discussed recommended rates at that time. The effective date would remain February 1st, 2021. We've discussed that with water customer accounting staff, and the way they would do that is they would prorate the old rate to any billing dates through January 31st, and the new rates would begin on February 1st, 2021. Action items for commission today is to adopt resolution 21-7927, correcting resolution number 207910, and amending the comprehensive fee schedule to provide water and wastewater rates effective February 1st, should be 2021. Approve the resolution with amendments as you might deem appropriate. Postpone the consideration of the resolution and give staff information as far as what information you would like to see us bring back. Or do not approve the resolution and the rates would remain the same as they were published in resolution 20-7910. Staff recommends option number 1.
Mayor Hodges, thank you, Ms. Pack. Are there any questions from commissioners? Seeing none, do we have any members of the public that would like to comment on this item? All right, in that case, I'd accept a motion on this item.
Commissioner Davis, move to adopt resolution 21-7927, correcting resolution 20-7910 and amending the comprehensive fee schedule to provide for water and wastewater rates effective February 1st, 2000. That should be 21, I'm guessing. It said 20.
Commissioner Ryan, second.
We have a motion and a second to approve resolution number 21-7927. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 5-0.
Commissioner Hoppick here, just because I've sat in your seat last week, we might want to do that on roll call. Remember, it makes it a little easier. Hey, I know I told you it takes a few weeks to get it under yours.
Oh, man. Well, I tell you what, let's do a roll call on that. Sorry, I should have been doing that all along. Thank you so much for the reminder.
Madam Mayor,
Aye.
Mayor, I just want to let you know that I did not have any hands raised, just so that's confirming for anybody watching.
Sorry, I'm getting in too big of a hurry. Do we want to go back and then take the roll call, Ms. Murmas?
Commissioner Davis,
Aye.
Commissioner Franz,
Aye.
Commissioner Hoppick,
Aye.
Commissioner Ryan,
Aye.
Mayor Hodges.
Aye. And the motion passes again, 5-0, and that will take us to item 7.3.
Item 7.3, Board Appointments Resolution. Item 7.3A, Resolutions number 217929, appointing members to the Animal Control Advisory and Appeals Board, Arts and Humanities Commission, Building Advisory Board, Business Improvement District Design Review Board, Disciplinary Advisory Board, Heritage Commission, Salina Community Economic Development Organization, and Saline County Community Corrections Advisory Board.
All right. Mayor Hodges, are there any questions or comments from the commissioners? Do we have any questions or comments from the public? And I'll try to allow more time this time.
No, we do not.
Thank you, Ms. Driscoll. With that, I'll bring it back to the commission.
Commissioner Davis, move approval of resolution 21-7929, appointing members to the various citizens boards as has been read previously.
Commissioner Hoppick, I second.
We have a motion and a second to approve various appointments to boards as indicated. I'm going to go with a roll call, please.
Commissioner Davis,
Aye.
Commissioner France,
Aye.
Commissioner Hoppick,
Aye.
Commissioner Ryan,
Aye.
Mayor Hodges.
Aye. And I just want to offer a heartfelt thanks to everyone who submitted their expression of interest to apply for these boards, and just to encourage you, we do have a lot more board openings, both for adult and for youth members. So speaking, if you've got a teenager in your life that has some interests in one of these city boards, it's very interesting, and it also looks really good on a resume. So I'd encourage you to take a look at the boards that we have openings for and submit your expression of interest, and that can be done through the City of Salina's website. Which brings us to item 7.4.
Item 7.4, Mayor Board Appointments.
Some members of the, Mayor Hodges here, some members of the public may not know that in addition to serving on the Salina City Commission, each commissioner also takes on the additional responsibility of serving as a liaison to other commissions and boards within the community. And the 2021 appointments for are as follows. Commissioner Davis will serve on the Salina Airport Authority and the Salina Saline County Building Authority. Commissioner France will serve on the North Central Regional Planning Commission, the Salina Arts and Humanities Commission, and the Salina Saline County Building Authority. Commissioner Hoppick will serve on the Convention and Tourism Committee and the Salina Community Economic Development Organization. Commissioner Ryan will serve on Parks and Recreation Advisory Board and the Salina Housing Authority. And I will serve on the Chamber of Commerce Board and the Library Board. So thank you for your contributions, which a lot of people may not know about. I really appreciate your volunteering to serve, and I'm glad that we got all these filled up and we've got good people assigned. Do we need to take any formal action to adopt these appointments?
Defer to the city attorney. We hadn't talked about that. I think he needs to be unmuted, Lauren. There we go.
I am now, thank you. Mayor, those are at your discretion, so you are having announced those is all that is necessary.
Thank you very much. All right. And thanks again to my fellow members of the governing body. And that will take us into development business.
Item 8.1, consider resolution 21-7928 of support for a low-income housing tax credit application being submitted by Sunflower Development Group to help finance development of 47 senior housing units in the former St. John's Hospital building at 139 North Penn Avenue.
All right. Is Mr. Andrew available and unmuted?
Believe I am. Ms. Driscoll and I are occupying the same room, so we'll try not to have any feedback here. This city staff was recently contacted by Mr. Jason Swords of Sunflower Development Group, and Sunflower Development Group expressed a desire to obtain a resolution of support for a 2021 application they're submitting for low-income housing tax credits to help finance their plan for converting the former St. John's Hospital building into housing for seniors. As part of that application process, the Kansas Housing Resource Corporation encourages a resolution of support from the local governing body indicating its approval and support both for the proposed housing and for the use of tax credits as a financing tool. The resolution that's attached provides that support, but also qualifies it by subjecting the final plans for the project to the city's building permit review process and other regulatory review processes. The tax credits are awarded through a competitive process, and I've outlined on page 1 of your report the calendar for the 2021 timeline. The most recent project in Salina that was awarded tax credits was phase 1 of the Lee building. This is a property that's also potentially eligible for the neighborhood revitalization tax credit program. And so that is an additional local incentive that could be available to assist the developers. As far as your options this afternoon, you could approve the attached resolution of support authorizing the issuance of housing tax credits for the rehabilitation of the former hospital building. You could postpone consideration of this resolution to a future meeting date if you feel additional information needs to be provided about the project before acting, or you could decline to approve the attached resolution of support for the project. In light of the commission's previous support for the use of tax credits to help finance rehabilitation of this building, staff recommends approval of the attached resolution.
Thank
And
you.
Jason Swartz is on the line if you have questions for the developer. I would be available for any questions that you have.
Mayor Hodges, thank you very much, Mr. Andrew. Is there anything that Mr. Swords would like to offer at this time?
Sure. First off, thank you for your time today to the commission, and go Chiefs from here in Kansas City. So as most of you know, we purchased this property back in 2015. My company, we've completed 18 historic renovations in Kansas and Missouri over the last 8 to 9 years. This has been a very difficult undertaking. It took us 4 years to get the former hospital eligible for historic tax credits. And then once we were able to get it eligible, we were told by KHRC that we really needed to stand down because they had just given quite a large award to the first phase of the Lee properties. So it pushed us back another year. So we are very excited about the opportunity with KHRC this year. We feel like we have a strong application, and this would be our third senior affordable housing project that we will have completed. All previous of the other two previous projects we've done have also been historic. I can tell you that, based upon the 13 additions that were built onto the original 1914 structure, it still is a complicated construction project. I had spoken to a member of staff earlier, and I know that there were some concerns about the amount of demolition that we would be doing. Just so everybody knows, we would be demoing the building down to the original structure itself, and getting rid of a handful of the additions from 1964, 1971, 1966, most of which have been, infiltrated with water, mold. There's a great deal of asbestos and environmental issues there as well. So we actually submitted our pre-application to KHRC last week. And again, we feel very good about our chances of getting a tax credit award here yet in 2021. We've been dedicated to this project since the day we bought the property, and continue to be so. So I would be happy to answer any questions from members of the commission or the public whatsoever.
Mayor Hodges, thank you very much, Mr. Swords. Are there any questions from the commission for either Mr. Andrew or for Mr. Swords?
I think he answered my question as to if the other buildings were going to be demolished and just leaving the original building. So
my understanding is the original building plus the 1951 addition.
1951, yeah.
Yeah, and I just want to make it clear that I'm understanding correctly that the rest of the property, with the exception of the Medall Center, which is, I think, currently in use, would be demolished to fairground.
Correct. So we would create parking in the 1971 edition area, which is just on the other side of the original building from the, I've always called it the Medial Center, but I may be saying that incorrectly. And then the rest would be green space and fencing and some outdoor amenities for our would-be residents. And we would be taking the original front of the remaining historic building back to its original facade. So we are excited about the opportunity.
Is there anyone else who has any questions? In that case, I do have one. Do you have, Mr. Swartz, do you have any sense of when the National Park Service is going to act on your application? And would that make the application for the tax credits that much stronger? Or, you know, does it hurt you having that being in a kind of a pending state, even though you've gotten the Kansas approval from the sites?
No, so this is a little bit different. It's kind of like the cart before the horse here. So we have an approved Part 1 through the National Park Service, but we do not have an approved historic National Register nomination. So we've submitted our Part 2, which will be approved by the National Park Service, but the property itself won't be eligible for the NR until we take down the older structures. So the fact that they've approved the Part 1 and they will approve the Part 2, although they may come back with a handful of changes that they will request, which, you know, we will work with them on. Once you've got an approved Part 1 and a Part 2, and if you perform that work as directed, which we always do, then it's automatically eligible for the NR. So typically we do an NR deal or an NR award prior to starting construction. In this case, it'll be post, because we need to take down the 60s and 70s structures in order to make it actually eligible for the register.
Gotcha. Thank you very much.
This is the most complicated historic deal we've ever done in our history. We've gone through and looked at the original joints, you know, attaching new building and older buildings and whatnot, and figured out everything that we can save. So we've got it dialed in, but it's been very complicated.
Well, hopefully this will be the jewel in Sunflower Development's crown. So
it better be. We're ready to go. So thank you.
Do we have any members of the public who have questions or would like to comment? If you do, please raise your virtual hand and Ms. Driscoll can unmute you, or Mr. Woods can unmute you and you can be heard.
Madam Mayor, I have no hands raised.
Thank you, Ms. Driscoll. I'll bring it back to the commission then.
Commissioner Hoppick here. I move that we approve the attached resolution of supporting the issuance of housing tax credit for the rehabilitation of the former St. John's Hospital into housing for seniors.
Commissioner
Ryan, second.
We have a motion and a second to approve resolution 21-7928. Could I have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Davis,
Aye.
Commissioner France,
Aye.
Commissioner Hoppick,
Aye.
Commissioner Ryan,
Aye.
Mayor Hodges.
Aye. That motion passes 5-0. Thank you, Mr. Swartz, for your time today, and best wishes for the project in the future. That'll take us to item 8.2.
Item 8.2, first reading ordinance number 21-11050 to consider an amendment of the future land use map of the Salina, Kansas Comprehensive Plan to change the future land use designation of property located on Cortland Circle south of Schilling Road and west of South Ohio Street from future employment to future neighborhood center, and an amendment of the text of the narrative describing the neighborhood center land use category of the Salina Comprehensive Plan to add 5C and PC5 to the list of potential zoning districts under the neighborhood center land use category.
Mr. Andrew.
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. South Ohio LLC owns the property that's at the southwest corner of South Ohio and Schilling Road. And they platted, annexed, and zoned that property in 2003 and has a mixture of zoning classifications. And as the commission is aware, two of the lots out in that subdivision are developed, one with Kennedy & Co. office, one with Sunflower Bank headquarters. The rest of the lots are undeveloped. And South Ohio Land has been looking at their vision for the property, and their vision has changed from what they envisioned in 2003. And in discussing that vision with representatives of South Ohio Land, it appears that their vision was closer to what the comprehensive plan envisions as a neighborhood center. And so they have filed an application to incorporate 14 lots in Liberty Edition number 2 into the existing neighborhood center that centers around the intersection of Schilling and Ohio. And so they have a companion application to rezone 9 lots in that area from Plan C6 to Plan C5. However, neither of those zoning classifications are identified as potential zoning districts under the neighborhood center land use narrative. So this is a 2-part request. In addition to requesting to change the map, they are requesting to amend the future land use narrative in the neighborhood center to add Plan C5 as a potential zoning district. The map amendment is limited just to this property. The text amendment, if approved, would apply to the city's other 7 neighborhood centers. This application went before the Planning Commission for a public hearing on January 5th, and the Planning Commission recommended that the map change be approved and that the list of potential zoning districts in the neighborhood center be amended to include Plan C5. And so this comes to you with a recommendation from the Planning Commission. If you concur with their findings and recommendations, the attached ordinance 21-11-050, amending the future land use designation and adding Plan C5 to the list of potential districts, should be approved on first reading. You could refer this application back to the Planning Commission for reconsideration, providing them reasons for any disagreement you have with their recommendation. Or you could overturn their recommendation and decide that the future land use designation of this property should remain unchanged. And you would make a motion that the ordinance not be approved. That action would require 4 affirmative votes. While the action of denying the change in the boundary would not absolutely preclude them from doing a mixed-use commercial residential development, it would indicate a lack of support for their companion application to change the zoning classification on the 9 lots to Plan C5. So with that, I'd be open to any questions that you have. Mr. James Hall is here representing South Ohio Land, and he could better articulate their vision for the property, but I'll be open to any questions you have about the comprehensive plan.
Commissioner Davis. Mr. Andrew, if this request did not come forward, was there any other impetus to add PC5 to the neighborhood center zoning inclusion?
Are you asking whether this would apply to other neighborhood centers?
Well, I mean, that's the subsequent effect of this. I'm just wondering whether was the option of addressing just this one parcel land zoning considered, as opposed to changing that designation for all other pieces of property that might come under that designation in the future?
Well, the zoning of the lots in question, the companion item, that zoning change could be approved. It's just, this is just an effort to try to make the zoning ordinance and the comprehensive plan line up. We have a lot of property within our existing mapped neighborhood centers that zone PC5, including all four corners of the Schilling, Ohio intersection, but it's not recognized in the plan as a potential zoning district. So the amendment would just make the plan and the text line up with each other.
Yeah, are there other, I won't necessarily say intersections, but other areas in which it would not be a good idea to make the change?
Well, the advantage of Plan C5 is twofold. For one, in a planned commercial district, no development can be approved without the site plan or site development plan being approved either by the Planning Commission or the City Commission itself. The other reason and why the Planning Commission limited their recommendation to Plan C5 only is that with Plan C5, you can go in and modify the list of approved uses or customize the district. So if you had a Plan C5 that was near a residential area or sensitive area, the commission would have the discretion to go in and delete uses that they think might be incompatible with the neighboring uses.
Right. So this project notwithstanding, if we had an undertaking, which I think we actually do, to have the future land use and the zoning line up with each other, this would be a change that you'd anticipate should be recommended anyway?
It's something that staff has been working on over the past few years. To be honest, the consultants who prepared the comprehensive plan, it was not a high priority for them to make the land use classifications line up with our current zoning classifications because they believed that our zoning classifications were going to change, that we would have a brand new zoning ordinance and brand new districts, and that has not happened. So we're still in the process of making the plan and our existing zoning districts line up with each other. So if this request was approved, someone could look at the neighborhood center at Markley and Magnolia, which is currently all vacant. And let's say they wanted to put a convenience store on one of those corners, they could apply for that. It doesn't mean it has to be approved, but if this amendment were approved, then an applicant who had property in a neighborhood center could apply for PC5 zoning in the future. It doesn't mean it would be approved or it had to be approved. It would just provide that as an additional option.
That reasoning, right, it sounds great. So, I mean, it's something that's good and should have been done irrespective of this project's request.
Yes, it's something that staff has worked on, not just in neighborhood centers, but there was an amendment and the Planning Commission had previously approved this same change in 2017. Just on final action, the Plan C5 did not get included at that time.
Right. Thank you.
Mayor Hodges, are there any other questions for either Mr. Andrew or Mr. Hall?
Commissioner Franz here. I would say that Mr. Andrews' response to Commissioner Davis's question answered my question, and that was that it appeared from some of the narrative that PC5 was not incorporated as a component of neighborhood center, and I was a little bit confused about, how that came to be, but he answered that, and apparently we are going to make this more consistent with this action.
Mayor Hodges, any other commissioners have questions?
None here.
If not, we'll open it up to the public for any questions or comments. If you would like to make a comment or if you have a question, please raise your virtual hand or send the organizer a message indicating that you'd like to speak and we'll get you unmuted.
Madam Mayor, Jamie Hall has his hand raised.
Mr. Hall.
Commissioners, thank you very much for considering this. Talking with Dean as we've gone through this and the rest of the staff members, this seemed to be the way that we untangled the mess and got everything lined back up so that it was all going to be consistent as things go forward, whether it's on this site or another site in the community. So we would greatly appreciate your support going forward with this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hall.
Madam Mayor, I have no other hands raised.
Thank you, Ms. Driscoll. With that, I will bring it back to the commission for further discussion or action.
Commissioner Hoppick here. I move we approve ordinance number 21-11050, amending the future land use designation of these 9 lots on Cortlandt Circle from employment to a neighborhood center and adding PC5 to the list of potential zoning districts in neighborhood center on first reading.
Commissioner Davis.
Commissioner Ryan, second.
We have a motion and a second to approve ordinance number 21-11050 on first reading. Could we get a roll call, please?
Commissioner Davis,
Aye.
Commissioner Franz,
Aye.
Commissioner Hoppick,
Aye.
Commissioner Ryan,
Aye.
Mayor Hodges.
Aye. That motion passes 5-0. Which brings us to the companion item 8.3.
Item 8.3, first reading ordinance number 21-11051 to consider an application Z20-5 filed by James Hall on behalf of South Ohio Land LLC, requesting approval of a change in zoning district classification from PC6 to PC5. The property that is the subject of this rezoning request is legally described as lots 1 through 5, block 4, and lots 1 through 4, block 5 in the corrected plat of Liberty Edition number 2, in addition to the city of Salina, Saline County, Kansas.
Mayor Hodges, thank you. Are there any questions or comments? Oh, wait, I'm so sorry, Mr. Andrew. I just skipped right over you. Turning it back to you.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Commissioners, this is a companion item to the item that you just heard, and this is for a smaller number of lots. You do have in your packets basically a colorized zoning map, and back in 2003, and working with South Ohio Land and trying to anticipate uses and a step down of uses from Schilling Road to the industrial to the south, we came up with Plan C6 as the appropriate designation for this tier of lots on Cortlandt Circle. And the reason for that was that Plan C6 was the first commercial district that allowed for warehouse type uses. And we chose Plan C6 because C6, unlike some of our industrial zones, requires paved parking and requires front yard landscaping and things like that. So we wanted to maintain the commercial development standards, but still allow for warehouse type uses. And it appears that we were wrong because there was seemingly a lack of market or interest in those types of uses on these lots. And South Ohio Land now envisions a different style of development, more of a mixed use development pattern with potentially some form of residential housing along with smaller scale neighborhood scale commercial uses. And because of their desire to create a mixed use development incorporating some form of housing, They are requesting that these 9 lots be rezoned from PC6 to PC5. So if this request is approved, all of the commercial lots in the Liberty Edition number 2 would be zone PC5. And this could actually be reviewed as a down zoning, more restrictive zoning from PC6 to PC5. This also went before the Planning Commission for a public hearing on January the 5th. The Planning Commission recommended that the zoning change on these lots be approved for PC5 zoning. And if you concur with that, the attached ordinance 21-11-051 rezoning these lots to Plan C5 should be approved on first reading. You could postpone consideration of this request if you have a disagreement with the recommendation of the Planning Commission, or to allow additional information to be provided by the applicant. Or you could vote to deny the attached ordinance and decline to approve the zoning change. So with that, I'd be open to any questions. The comprehensive plan part of this is a little more complicated. This is pretty straightforward. It would basically make all the lots in Liberty Edition the same zoning designation.
Mayor Hodges. Thank you, Mr. Andrew. Are there any questions from the commissioners for Mr. Andrew or for Mr. Hall about the zoning change?
Commissioner Franz here, and I'm going to divert from the specific question, but I'm sitting here, I'm looking at the last action we took, and the motion was to change the future land use designation from employment to a neighborhood center. But if you look at the map attached, it appears that what's happening is changing them from office to a neighborhood center. It seems to be a point of discrepancy, and which is it?
Your question is whether we're changing it from employment center to neighborhood center?
Yes, because the attached map show that the area that I think we're talking about is as being office currently.
Within the employment land use area, there's a subcategory that's office only, because the employment area is a really broad, includes industrial uses. And it was given an office designation because it's not zoned for industrial use.
Okay, thank you. I just saw that and I thought, well, that needs to be consistent.
That would be my fault, because I didn't instruct the GIS technician to include the word employment on there, but it's an employment area with limited to office uses, which indicates it's not industrial.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor Hodges, so we are good on the action that we just took. I'm hearing, are there any other questions or comments from commissioners? Oh, not a commissioner, but Mr. Scragg, got your hand raised.
Commissioner, but Mike Scragg here. I think it might be helpful for Mr. Andrew just to touch on the deferred site plan approval aspect of this planned district.
Yeah, one of the things that occurred here is that when this was all done, South Ohio Land agreed to make this entire subdivision a planned district, which subjected every lot in the subdivision to a site plan review. But at this time, there's no specific development plan for any particular lot. So one of the options in a planned commercial district is to request the zoning, and then each of the site plans for the individual lots or a combination of lots would come back for a site plan review as projects are proposed. And to date, the only site plan that's been approved is for the Sunflower Bank headquarters. And the other thing I failed to note was that the other thing that's unique about this subdivision, it has 3 different cost recovery fees to the city that are collected to help pay back the cost of infrastructure. So there's one that helps reimburse the cost of Schilling Road, reimburses the cost of a water line, and reimburses the cost of the Schilling Road ditch, which serves as stormwater detention. So as each lot develops, South Ohio Land will be paying a impact fee, actually 3 impact fees as each lot develops.
All right, thank you. Any other questions or comments from commissioners? Seeing none, Ms. Driscoll, I'll turn to you to see if there are any members of the public that would like to comment or have questions on this item.
Sorry, it's a bit of a leapfrog, Madam Mayor, because Dean and I are in the same room. We're having to mute so we don't have feedback. So I do not have anybody raising their hand, but I do believe I heard Jamie Hall.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes. Yeah. I'm sorry, Mr. Hall, I didn't mean to cut you off. Please go ahead.
Thank you. When we started this project, what seems like a short time ago, but it's actually been a long time ago, we sat down with the city staff and with Greg Bingston and a whole group of people and did our best to come up with what we thought was going to be the use for this land going forward. At that time, the location to the north of us and to the east of us had not been envisioned yet. As time has gone on and the neighborhood has found its own way to develop, we look at ourselves and say that maybe we were there first, but the practice that has happened after that has proven that we were not exactly right on all these lots. So at this time, that's why we're coming back to do this, to change this, to be more in line with what the entire area is developing into. And by taking this down zoning action, we feel that we're doing that. We do have shovel-ready lots with streets that we have put up and paid for that have sewer and water in them. And we would just like everyone to help us see this through so we can get some more work going out there. Appreciate your input.
Mayor Hodges, thank you, Mr. Hall. Do you have a proposed groundbreaking date? Not that it's germane to this action, but because I'm nosy.
We have no projects planned. We just think that we've had enough people come and knock on our door, and the lots they point at, we have to say, well, we can't do that there. So that's why we're taking this action, to get it more in line with what needs to be there today.
Thank you. I'll bring it back to the commission for any other questions or comments or action.
Commissioner Hoppick, I move we concur with the recommendation of the Planning Commission and approve ordinance number 21-11051, rezoning this property from PC 6 to PC 5 on first reading.
Commissioner Ryan, second.
I have a motion and a second to approve on first reading ordinance number 21-0051. May I have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Davis.
Aye.
Commissioner Franz.
Aye.
Commissioner Hoppick.
Aye.
Commissioner Ryan.
Aye.
Mayor Hodges.
Aye. Motion passes 5-0. Thank you, Mr. Hall. Appreciate you being here today.
Thank you for having me there.
Which brings us to other business. Do any commissioners have some other business to discuss? I see Commissioner Davis has his hand up.
Mine's fast. Seeing the citizens approved for the advisory boards reminded me that we still need to move on our formal education process for all of our citizens boards. I'm not asking for anything date specific, but just a reminder.
Yep, agreed.
Okay.
Mayor Hodges, I agree too. I mean, we've had some prolonged discussions about the necessity for our ethics training with various board members to get oriented for that. So I am looking forward to that. But is there anything from any of the other commissioners?
Commissioner Ryan here. Mr. Tragg, you had an article discussing some possible proposed legislation in the Kansas Senate, I believe, that's going to further cap our ability to control our finances, the revision of last year's tax cap. Could you speak to that? And if that in fact is the case going forward, I think that as a commission, we should respond to our legislators and tell them our feelings about that type of regulation.
Sure. Mike Scraig here. I'll do my best to summarize it as I understand it. And I would tell you that the League of Kansas Municipalities has taken a neutral position on the legislation. So the way it's being described is removing the cap on the property tax or removing the property tax lid, but imposing a burden on, or not responsibility, I should say, on a taxing entity if they were going to set their mill rate such that that would generate additional revenue for them. Then there's a notice requirement. And my understanding is that is mailed notice to every property owner or property address within the taxing district. So above and beyond, a typical published notice in the newspaper, it's mailed notice. So on the one hand, there's added responsibility or added, process, but it removes the tax lid such that if you as the governing body choose to, set a mill rate that generates additional revenue compared to the year prior, you have the authority to do it. You just have that responsibility to provide notice and go through that hearing process. So, like I said, the league has taken a neutral position on it. They took a position against a property tax lid originally, and they kind of see this as, I don't want to say a compromise necessarily, but offsetting additional process in response to that ability to raise that rate.
Do rising property tax values for the, suppose there's some community value that's computed, then do we have to lower the mill levy in accordance to match that? And how does that go with properties that we have given property tax forgiveness to?
Yeah, I don't know that I can, yes, the expectation is that we would remain revenue neutral from year to year. And if there was property value increases, we would make a corresponding adjustment unless we went through that process to, meet the requirements to have the public notice and public hearing process to either take advantage of that assessed value or gain, or if you just chose that we needed additional revenue for a particular purpose, you go through that process as well. With respect to tax increment properties, I don't know that I've looked at it in that great a detail. But we continue to capture the increment. I guess it could alter the increment generation and could alter the performance of the district.
Well, considering the uniqueness of each community, I find that leveling argument not to make a lot of sense to me.
I understand, that's the position the league took quite some time ago, is local control, local authority, that the decisions are best made at the local level, and that didn't seem to carry the day when they passed that legislation. Somewhat ironically, that is the approach they're now taking to COVID decisions, is that they should be at the local level, not the state level. But I don't want to divert too far into alternate political topic here.
Thank you.
So I think it's workable. I mean, you as a governing body, your hands are not completely tied, but it would create an added level of public notice and process.
Mayor Hodges, I guess following up on Commissioner Ryan's question then, so like in terms of process or in terms of timeline, what does that do? I mean, so how far out are we going to need to begin say, the budgeting process? Does this affect all of our other timelines if we're trying to build in a mailing notice and a hearing notice?
Yeah, I don't know that it changes the adoption date for the budget, but as that legislation gets adopted, we'd have to look at those advance notices, and it may cause us to start to have our budget conversations sooner.
Yeah, yeah.
But if it goes through this legislative cycle, then it would be effective for 2022. So we'd have to factor it in at that point.
Thank you. Anyone else with anything under other business? I do have one thing that I wanted to ask fellow members of the governing body. And that's in regard to, we've talked in the past about the Citizen Review Board that we're going to be establishing. And I wanted to see if any of the commissioners had any further thoughts on the selection process for the Citizens Review Board.
Commissioner Davis, it would be a daunting task to review 92 expressions of interest, but I don't know whether it'd be fair to any of those 92 people if we all five didn't review, at least see each one. You know, my suggestion would be that we review them and bring to the table 10 or however many seats are open suggestions, and apparently we have to vet this in public, and at least we'd each only be vetting 10 people instead of 92.
All right. Anyone else? Because I think I had something that was working along the same path as what you've suggested.
If I understand, Commissioner Franz there, if I understand that suggestion is that we would each look at all of those applications and select 5 or 10 or whatever, our 5 or 10 preferreds, and then we put that in a matrix and figure out who gets the most votes and consider those in order as far as the appointment goes.
Commissioner David, right, I mean, you never know. There may be 80, 90% overlap of our choice, which would make it very easy.
You know, I get that, and I think that's as good an approach as any. And if it works out, there's 80% overlap, I would feel extremely fortunate. You know, what concerns me is that we all pick 10 entirely different people. I don't know that that's necessarily the case, but you know, it would still limit the universe of consideration.
Well, we can do it like they do for a pope. We go in the room, and when we get our selection, what is it, white smoke or black smoke up the chimney?
Yeah.
And Commissioner Hoppick here, and I believe that would need to be 10 and separate from the individual that would be representing the Salina Police Department and also the Human Relations Commission, correct?
Right.
Unless there's more than one police officer who.
But then I think you need to pick one of those. So I think if there's more from the Human Relations, you'd pick one, and then it'd be 10 separate ones from the public is the way I would.
I have a question that, does the Human Relations select their own rep, or do we select? I thought they selected their own.
I think they select their own, don't they? I don't know.
That was my understanding. But
Greg, you're muted.
One second.
Can someone unmute Greg?
All right.
There we go.
My recollection is that you chose to go with the same model as the designees from to the Board of Zoning Appeals and the Heritage Commission from the Planning Commission, and that was that those are mayoral appointments.
But would the mayor then anticipate that the chair of the Human Relations Commission recommend a name? Because you have to have a person who's going to be there that year, who wants to be there, et cetera, et cetera.
Right. And I think that that's something, sorry, Mayor Hodges, something that we need to nail down. I had assumed that that was something that the Human Relations Commission would decide on internally, you know, taking those things into consideration in terms of, time available, commitment level, where they're at in their serving their term, and then pretty much make a pro forma recommendation to the city, and we would accept the Human Relations Commission's recommendation. That's how I had been looking at it, but I'll defer to council as to whether or not that's the way it would work.
I will be happy
that's
to.
the way it works.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd be happy to confirm my recollection that it was to be a mayoral appointment from the membership of the Human Relations Commission. I hope I'm not mistaken in that, but I can check that here as you continue the discussion.
Sure.
Madam Mayor, I would just add, both Dean Andrew and I are still here in the same room, and working with Planning Commission and BZA where we have these situations. I will tell you that the board does discuss the appointment, and as a body makes that recommendation through a resolution that then comes to the city commission for that final decision.
Thank you for the clarification, Mr. Driscoll. Anybody else that would like to weigh in, have some suggestions on the process itself?
Yeah, the 10 names, I guess, is okay. I kind of, in my mind, had more like 15 or something that might give us a little more chance for overlap, but I don't know if there's a magical number there.
Right.
Commissioner Dave, 15 to be fine. The only thing I would request, if possible, and I'll leave up to the other 4, that might be something for which we'd want to get the information 10 days before we're going to discuss it instead of 3.
Absolutely. Mr. Schwing, where are we at? I know that staff was trying to collate that into some sort of a spreadsheet. But I suppose failing that, we can, go through the applications individually. How are we doing on the spreadsheet?
I'm sorry, is that a question for me? Yeah, the spreadsheet's developed. I think in light of the direction that you're giving, what I'd like to do is confer with Mr. Bankston just in terms of process, and we might be able to turn that into a ballot of sorts, as long as we're aware of Kansas open meetings, open records provision. So I think that I agree with you. I'm glad to hear you say that, all the information go to all the commissioners, and we can certainly facilitate that by way of table and get you the documentation. I think what we may need to talk about a little bit more is how to tally those votes, whether you just come to the meeting and we tally them on the spot, or whether it's appropriate or inappropriate to try to do that in advance. But
well, bear with me. This may not be a suggestion that you all can live with, but something that I've been thinking about is that, like Commissioner France and Commissioner Davis said, review the applications in their entirety, and then we take the top, because it's a 9-member board, if I'm not mistaken. 9-member board with, isn't that correct, Mr. Bankston? With the designated position for the law enforcement officer and the human relations position?
Yes, it is 9 in total. Yes, Mayor, this is Greg Bankston, legal counsel. If you don't mind me taking a moment, I have pulled up that text and can quickly go through that exact language if you wish.
Sure, thank you.
First of all, the section that we're speaking of is 30-83. It begins by making the point the board shall be appointed by the mayor with the consent of the governing body, and that it shall consist of 9 members. The subpoints that address the specific membership components, number 1 is 1 current member of the Human Relations Commission nominated by the Human Relations Commission from among the members whose term on the Human Relations Commission will remain in effect for the duration of the term of the board. Second is 1 current member of the police department with 3 years experience as a member of the police department and the current rank of either police officer or police sergeant. And lastly, 7 persons who have demonstrated interest or experience in police and/or community relations.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Bankston. That's incredibly helpful. So my proposal would be that we take the applications in their entirety. We each come up with, and this is for the members of the general public, 7 names to correspond with the 7 positions on the Citizens Review Board, and that we rank them. And I think what the ranking of the members of our selections would help us all do, is instead of just getting a group of 7 names or 10 names or whatever it ends up being, and not knowing, like in your mind, who is most important that we get on the commission. I would see it working something like, trying to ensure that we got somebody's top 2, a top 2 selection from each commissioner onto the board, and take that approach. And even if we wanted to take it a step further, if we did rank our orders of preference and there was something specific that we wanted to note about, say, the top 2 or 3 choices, like, this is why I feel so strongly that this person should be, would make a really good member of the Citizens Review Board, we could take that into account. And I just think that we're going to probably need to get into some sort of ranked decision making. And then in terms of the current police officer, I don't know whether we have 10 applications or 1. So that may be a self-limiting problem. But I would propose that we handle this at least consistently with the way that we handle our other board appointments. Because just in looking, our guidelines for the selection of this committee are pretty broad. And when I looked at them today, all it talks about is the racial and ethnic diversity of the city of Salina, with overrepresentation of minority populations in comparison with local demographics. But I think that if, as we look amongst ourselves, we'd agree that there's a lot of diversity that we can represent. For example, we don't want, 7 all women. We don't want, 7 people that are over 65. We don't want 7 people that are 18. We want to find a good mix of people who have different experiences and bring different experiences to the board. I think it's also really important that we somehow vet the folks. I know that there's obviously a background check that they need to pass, but I think something, and I feel like it's my responsibility as the mayor, would be to reach out to these people to confirm that they have the time to devote to this. This is a startup board. They're going to need to have both quantity of time and flexibility of time in terms of getting this thing off the ground. But I almost think that there's going to need to be an additional contact with those people to ensure that they're really willing to give this the time that it deserves, and also to ensure that we're getting really objective people. We don't, and I'm assuming, I'm saying this at least for myself, we don't want someone who's got a huge bias against the police. We also don't want someone who can't apply any critical thinking skills. We need to find that person who comes to this with an open mind. So I guess my proposal would be to receive ranked lists from all of you, and then take it from there and bring it back to you for your approval.
Commissioner Davis, I kind of like that. I might even, rank them. The first person out of 7 gets 14, the next one gets 12, just to spread out the point totals a little bit,
Right.
but I like that idea.
I'm on board with that too. With the caveat that, we cannot simply apply the ranking without thinking about it, because it's entirely possible that, people that we rank as most important all fit within a certain demographic or don't, as the case may be. We just need to make sure that that doesn't result in leaving someone who ought to be there out simply because they didn't fall within any of our ranking systems. So I think we need to that's helpful and can inform our decision, but I think we need to apply that with a bit of discretion.
Absolutely.
Good judgment.
Absolutely.
Commissioner Day, so you bring your top 7, but bring your next 5.
Bring your top 7.
Bring your next 5 on a second sheet of paper, right?
And rank them. And if there's a particular reason, i.e., if there's something that you can share about an applicant that makes them a compelling addition to that board, I think that speaks a little bit to what Commissioner France, is talking to. We can read through their applications, but sometimes if there's a personal experience, like I saw Jane Doe negotiate a very difficult situation or mediate a very difficult situation, and all parties came out of it and felt good about the process. We just need a lot of different skill sets on that board. And so at any rate, that's why I was thinking rankings would help. Personal notes about, why you feel so strongly maybe about your top 3 choices. I'm not saying you have to write a 250-word essay, but if there's just something that you can share about why that choice makes sense to you, we need to take advantage of everybody's points of view and their points of contact in the community. I'm just kind of looking around. Are we?
That sounds good. And if Commissioner Davis, and it might be worthwhile to read those, highly qualified candidates in our own minds, read those at the beginning of the selection process.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, well, we'll kind of just keep working down that path, and hopefully we can get the applications in some form or another, and I'll get with Mr. Sprague and we'll get that figured out. Thank you for indulging me with that time. I really appreciate it, but I'd like to keep that moving forward if we can. I guess that brings us, absent any other business, that'll bring us to our executive session for personnel.
I'll be more than happy to read that until we officially switch our seats. But how many minutes for this session?
I'm going to look at Commissioner Hoppick. I was kind of thinking 20 minutes, but
20 minutes. I think 20 minutes should work.
okie doke, 20 minutes.
Right. Commissioner Davis, I move the City Commission recess into executive session for 20 minutes to discuss the city manager's performance evaluation based upon the need to discuss personnel matters of non-elected personnel pursuant to KSA 75-4319B1. The open meeting will resume via the same Zoom link and the City of Salina YouTube channel at 5:52 p.m.
Madam Mayor, can I confirm that that's all the commission members and City Manager Sprague? Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Second.
Right, make that 5:53 now.
We have a motion and a second to recess into executive session for 20 minutes, resuming on this Zoom link at 5:53 p.m. Roll call, please. Sorry.
Commissioner Davis.
Aye.
Commissioner France.
Aye.
Commissioner Hoppick.
Aye.
Commissioner Ryan.
Aye.
Mayor Hodges.
Aye. Thank you. We'll be back here in 20 minutes.
We're waiting for that.
We're waiting for a
Quarter.
breakout room, right?
I've
Yeah.
never done it myself, and I think this may be Lauren's first time, so we
I
should see.
think I got it.
There's a guy in a uniform that's
Yeah.
smiling in the corner
Looking
there
over
on my
his shoulder.
screen. But he's muted.
There we
Thank
go.
you, I got the link.
Got it?
Got it.
Got it.
Okay. So Jacob, then I just hang out and they come back on their own?
Do we have all the commissioners back and? able
Chris,
to-
Mr.
Mr.
Commissioner
Franz and
Davis,
Davis.
still muted.
Okay. Commissioner
One second.
Davis?
There you go.
I'm back. All right. All right.
Okay.
Madam Mayor, I move the city commission recess again into executive session for 20 minutes to discuss the city manager's performance evaluation based upon the need to discuss personnel matters of non-elected personnel pursuant to KSA 75-4319B1. The open meeting will resume via the same Zoom link and the City of Salina YouTube channel at 6:14 p.m. Thank you.
Is there a second? We have a
Commissioner
motion.
Ryan, second.
We have a motion and a second to resume our executive session and resume in this Zoom room at 6:14 p.m. Commissioner Davis,
Aye.
Commissioner France,
Aye.
Commissioner Hoppick,
Aye.
sorry, Commissioner Ryan,
Aye.
Mayor Hodges, aye. All right, we'll go back to the breakout room.
Do you guys use the same link or do I need to reassign you?
I think you need to reassign it.
Fine.
Need to reassign this, yes.
Try that. No, hold on. I'm going to,
Oh, I see it now.
There it
okay,
is.
sorry,
Good job, Lauren.
thanks.
All right, is everybody back and can hear?
You know, I could be wrong, but I think behind that mask, Lauren likes having the power to mute all of us.
I don't know. This is a lot of cat herding. I told
Yeah.
Jacob tried to say that this could be my new job, and I was like, no.
Well, we've got a new person on the Zoom controls. We've got the new we've got the assistant city clerk, and we've got the mayor that doesn't know, that isn't in a rhythm yet. So we've really got.
And we survived.
We
Yeah,
did.
if we hadn't self-disclosed, I don't know if people would have noticed.
At any rate, I don't know that we have any action to take right now, other than to communicate our thanks to City Manager Mike Scragg for his leadership and for shepherding us through what is probably going to go down as one of the most difficult years in history. And being a city manager during that time is a whole new challenge. So you rose to the occasion, and really want to offer my heartfelt thanks. And I think on behalf of the commission, thank you for your leadership.
Most
I'm not sure
definitely.
that translates into any action, but if we can come up with a resolution of appreciation for next week or the week after, I think that would be a very good thing to do.
But thank you, I appreciate it. I'm happy to serve, and the whole team really stepped up.
And we don't say this often enough, you know, not just to ourselves, but we owe your family a debt of gratitude for putting up with what I know are early mornings and late nights for you, and calls on Saturday afternoons and all the other times you're supposed to be off. So please extend our thanks to them.
I will do it. It's definitely a team effort at home too.
Well put.
All right. In the absence of any other business, I will accept a motion to adjourn.
Commissioner Hoppick here, so moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adjourn the meeting. I'll just go ahead and do a quick roll call since I'm here. Commissioner Davis.
Aye.
Commissioner France.
Aye.
Commissioner Hoppick.
Aye.
Commissioner Ryan.
Aye.
Mayor Hodges. Aye. We are adjourned, and we will see you all next week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.